Do a review in Likutei Sichos. This is in Chelek Chavav, volume 26, and this is the first Sicha for the portion of Vayakhal. We'll learn this in memory of Harav Levi Yitzchok and Rabbi Chaim Tzvi in the year of Avelus, this passing dedicated Shliach who passed away all of a sudden, and we'll dedicate the Maimer Lilu Nishmosei. The Sicha Lilu Nishmosei. This is a Rashi Sicha, and the Rebbe asks question that Oldham Mefarshim asks in a simple Rashi, and the Rebbe explains it very simply that Rashi means different than what it's the Mefarshim think that it means, and the Rebbe explains that when Rashi says Higdim Lohem Azhoras Shabbos, is not explaining why the Torah writes one thing before the other, but it explains why Moshe Rabbeinu told to them before, as the Rebbe will articulate, and then there is going to be further explanation in the Sikha. We'll go step by step. Aleph. B'tchilas hasedre steht Vayakhal Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael. So that's the opening of the portion of Vayakhal. So it says that Moshe gathered the entire Jewish community. Vayomer aleihem goimer. And he tells them. And the first thing he tells them is Sheishes Yomim Te'oseh Melocha Goimer, that you work for 6 days and then you keep Shabbos. So Rashi of the Werter. So Rashi places himself on the words Sheishes Yomim, 6 days. And he says, explains, Higdim Lahem Azhoras Shabbos Litzivui Melechas HaMishkan, that he proceeded to tell them, the Bnei Yisrael, the warning of Shabbos. They have to keep the Shabbos. He told it to them first before the Tzivu Melechas HaMishkan, before commanding them about the Melechas HaMishkan. Following this commandment, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them about the Melechas HaMishkan, but this comes first. And the reason for that is Loimar, to say She'eina Doiche Es HaShabbos, that the Melechas HaMishkan does not override the Shabbos. So it seems like in Pashtus that Rashi is trying to say here, the Torah writes first the prohibition against doing work on Shabbos in order to tell you that you cannot, that comes first. That later on we'll learn about Melechas HaMishkan, but first you have to keep Shabbos, and the work of the Mishkan does not override the Shabbos. So Vimalerin bepashtus. So as you learn in the simply in is Kavonas Rashi. What's Rashi's intent? Ados was the Torah is Magdim as Horas Shabbos Litzivim Melechas HaMishkan. That the Torah introduces first the warning for Shabbos before doing the command for working the Mishkan is abavais. That's proof. As Horas Shabbos is harber, that the warning, the Shabbos, keeping Shabbos is more serious. Vider tzivur melechas hamishkan than the command of melechas hamishkan. That's why it comes first, because that's the more important one. Und der Riber is melechas haShabbos, melechas hamishkan nidoich Shabbos, and therefore the work in the Mishkan cannot push away Shabbos because Shabbos is more important. So from this, it seems to say that whatever comes first in the Torah, if you have two things, the first thing is the more serious one, and therefore it cannot be overridden by what follows. But the Mefarshim, the Rebbe brings down, as we find Befedish in the Torah just fakert, that it is the second one that is more strict, that we say that it comes second to tell you that you can't, even though I've told you to do something before, but then you can't do the Shabbos, like by Shabbos itself, as the Rebbe will bring down. Is kosher, so it's difficult with a Forshim Fragen, as asked by the commentators. Men gefindt kamo pa'omim wo stehen zwei Zivuyim b'smichu zelazeh. We find many times, several times, that there are two commands next to each other. Rashi is mefarish. Rashi interprets as der meuchar is doicha dem mugdam. The one that comes later overrides the earlier one, which would be, in our case, it would mean that the Mishkan should override the Shabbos. Rashi says, no, it comes first there. But we find the other way around. Ein Heibendik from the Mzelben Inyan das Kinabay. Let's start with the same subject that we are dealing now is Shabbos and Mishkan. Shabbos u'melechas HaMishkan. Keeping Shabbos versus the work needed to do for the Mishkan. In Parshas Tisa, the portion of Kisis, the portion before, Oifum Posik va'ato dabir, and the verse where it says, you speak to the Bnei Yisrael, ach es Shabbos soisai tishmoiru gomer, that you should keep my Shabbos. And over there, the Torah talks about the Melechas HaMishkan in the Parshas Kisisa in the end. And then the Torah says, but keep my Shabbos. But the Torah is magdim dem tzivu Melechas HaMishkan faras hora Shabbos. The Torah proceeds to tell us about the instruction of the Mishkan before the Torah tells us about Shabbos. So we see, even though Mishkan comes first, but yet Shabbos doesn't override the Shabbos, the Mishkan. Is Rashi mefarish? So what does Rashi explain over there? Even though you are going to be running, you're being chased, you have to do the malacha quickly. From Mishkan, Shabbos al titchem mipaneho. Do not push away Shabbos from it. So Shabbos is coming after Mishkan to tell you that don't allow for the work of the Mishkan to stop you from keeping Shabbos. And Shabbos comes after. We hear you're saying that it becomes because Shabbos before. Al derech ze weiter in Parshas Kedoshim. Similar, later on in the Parshas of Kedoshim state, Ish imoy ve'aviv tiro. So it says a man, first the father, and then the mother, and then the pasuk said tiro, and after saying that you have to fear father and mother, mother and father, the Torah talks about Shabbos. As Shabsui say Tishmeir, keep my Shabbos. Zokt Rashi b'pirushay. So Rashi, this commentary says, so mach shmiras Shabbos l'meira of. The Torah juxtaposes, puts the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos next to the fear of a father. Loimar, to tell you, even though I have warned you, instructed you that you need to fear your father, but if your father tells you, desecrate the Shabbat, don't listen to him. So the mitzvah of Shmira Shabbos comes after Ava'im. And yet, Ava'im Yiros of Av, does not override the Shabbos. Undo, but over here, in the beginning of Vayakhal, is Rashi Madgish. Rashi emphasizes as der Higdim, because the Torah writes first, Shabbos is Ayichoche, as Shabbos is Deicha Melechas HaMishkan. That's evidence that Shabbos persuades the Melechas HaMishkan. So to us, it seems like when the Torah, that Rashi is trying to say here, when the Torah writes that first, that means that it's more important. But in all the other cases, the cases in Parshas Kisisa and in Parshas Kedoshim, over there, Shabbos comes later, and over there it means not that you could, but you can't override it, as the Rebbe will explain. in Oi's base. The Rebbe explains from the Mefarshim that it's not over there from the Hikdim, but over there we learn now because the Pasuk says Ach, and Tiro, as the Rebbe will continue to explain and to explain why their answer isn't sufficient. Oi's base. The Mefarshim answeren. The Mefarshim say it's not the earlier or the later in the other psukim, but over there we have special exclusions that tell us that it doesn't override the Shabbos. Mefarshim enter. The Parshas Tisa is Rashi Mefarish. In Rashi explains in the portion of Tisa as me lernt das op vom Wort ach. Rashi says, Kol achin verakin miutim. Whenever it says ach, it's coming to exclude. Lemait Shabbos memelechas hamishkan. To exclude Shabbos from the work of the Mishkan. So there's a special limud of ach, achas Shabbos tishmeru, to exclude that Shabbos not to do the work of the Mishkan. Not because it's later, but because there is ach. Al derech zeh in Parshas Kedoshim is Rashi mamshich in the Dibur Shlachar zeh. Rashi continues in the following Dibur. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, after ish the Pasuk says Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Rashi teaches Atov ve'avicha chayovim b'kavodi. Since you and your father are obligated in my honor, lefikach leitishma le'levat lesdvari. That's why you shouldn't listen to your father if he tells you to go against the words of Hashem. Das heißt, as in the beide Fallum Musman Onkelman to the Werter, in both cases, the Psukim in Kisisa and in Kedoshim, to the words Ach und Ani Hashem Elokeichem, zu bevornen as Shabbos wird nicht nitche, in order to caution us that Shabbos is not overridden from Melechas HaMishkan U'Meirav, from the Melechas HaMishkan U'Meirav. Is der fun gufa verstandig. So from this itself, since we have a special pasuk, as adrabe, then on the contrary, bichlal is der mugdam deuche the mucher, like by us in Kisisa. Generally speaking, this is the Mefarshim explain that the mugdam overrides the meucher, and so that would fit with Rashi in Kisisa, and the riber, and therefore. Lulei the psukim ach by Melechas HaMishkan in Parshas Tisa. Had it not been for the pasuk ach written by Melechas HaMishkan, the portion of Tisa only Hashem by Merav, what metake gesagt, we would take say as weil die Tzivuyim of Melechas HaMishkan and Merav stay in Faras Hora Shabbos, since they are written, the work for the Mishkan and Kisisa Merav in the Kedoshim are written before the word of Shabbos, and Zedech Shabbos, like we say by us, which the one that comes first is Doicha. But we have a special pasuk telling not Doicha. So this would fit with our Rashi. But the Rebbe says, but in Derech HaPshat is there Birnit Masrik. But on the style of learning in Pshat, it's not sufficient. But the whole Gufa came a frag. Because then this itself, one can ask. It means the Torah written the wrong order, and then it writes the Achad, it writes Hashem to tell us that it doesn't override. Why did the Torah not write Lechatchila, the one that is more serious, the Shabbos and the first? And then say the Mishkan, and then say Moirav. Vahogov Kemfrek, Vavos is the Torah Magdim Tzivim Lechas HaMishkan. Valderach the Moirav. Why does the Torah proceed to write the Tzivim Lechas HaMishkan and similar Moirav? Faras Hora Shabbos, before the warning of Shabbos. Mishum Zeh Darfen Meisiv Zayin the Miyut, and because it says before, which would mean which would seem that the Aviv and the Mishkan should override. And that's why the Torah, Madaf Moses and the Miud, Torah has to add the exclusion, the Ach, und the Heisofa, Niashav Lekechem. So why did it write like that? As hot Melachat Chilek, Ken Stein Ashoras Shabbos, Koiden Lemlechas HaMishkan Meirav. It could have, to begin with, have stated the warning for Shabbos before Melechas before Meirav, and then you would know that it's not override. From their Kedima Gewusst, we would have known because of this that it comes first Shabbos that the Mishkan and the Meirav don't override it. Because Shabbos is Doichim Melechas Mishkan and Meirav, that Shabbos overrides them Melechas Mishkan Meirav, and we wouldn't need to switch the Seder and say Ach and then Yishem Alekechem tell us otherwise. So while the Mefarshim explained that it's not a contradiction, but still we don't have an explanation why the Torah writes that. So therefore, the Rebbe says the fun mashma. So from this it appears, as fun kedima alein kemenit oplernen. You cannot learn just one comes before the other one. As the erster tzivui is deichet dem zweiten, that the first one overrides the other one. So that's why even saying it, if it's said the other way, we still wouldn't know. You need exclusion and a specific learning of Ach or Niyashav Alekechem to tell us beferish that it doesn't override the Shabbos. So how does Rashi say here? Higdim und da sagt Rashi Higdim Shabbos Chulu Loimar Sheina Deiche Es Shabbos. That Rashi says here that because it says first to tell us that it doesn't override the Shabbos, but we say we don't know that it overrides the Shabbos just by saying, because that's why we need a special exclusion later on. So why does Rashi say that here in the pasuk in Vayakhal we're first talking about Shabbos to tell us that Shabbos is more serious and you can't do the Mishkan and can't override the Shabbos with the Mishkan. And Gefinta Nariches, the Rebbe says, we find a great length in the Forshe. Rashi in the Kushya now. They answered the above question with Farshidene Terutzim V'chilukim, with various kinds of answers and distinction. When and in what case you can learn from when something says first to made that is actually the main and that overrides what follows. As the erster tzivu is doichet and zweiten, the first one is doichet and zweiten. But the Rebbe says all these differences is not according to Pshat. Aber vigeret kam upon, as we had spoken many times, Rashi had geschrieben sein Pirush al Torah in a signal. Rashi wrote it in a style. As Oicha ben Chomesh lemikras al kenem verstehen, that also a 5-year-old who's learning Chumash should be able to understand Kavonas Rashi, what Rashi means for seine gezielte Wörter, from the few words that Rashi writes. Nidarfen dikin hoisofes bir al zeh, without needing additional explanation. The Mepharshim give different explanations, but the Rebbe says Rashi writes so you can understand from the few words that he does write, without needing additional explanation, which the Mepharshim explain. So the Rebbe says it's not likely that Rashi means the other Mepharshim. So therefore, the Rebbe says that's not really what Rashi means. Befrat, as in our case, is it's a big debate, a give and take in Mefarshei Rashi, Mitfarshidene Terutzim, with various kind of answers. So it's not such a simple explanation. Is l'chayre nit mistaber zu sagen. So the Rebbe says it seems it's not probable to say, as Rashi meant kipshute shel pirush Rashi. Rashi meant kipshute shel pirush Rashi. When we learned the Rashi bepashtus, the allerlei biurim, all of these explanations. Und is soise muzok nit And then Rashi keeps it closed. It doesn't say Welche von the viele Beurim and Nemton, which one of these all many different explanations he accepts. And it just leaves it all there for the debate. Doesn't really fit. Therefore, it's probable to say, as by learning the Wörter for Rashi Atzmo, but just by learning the words of Rashi himself, is Altsmoven and Musbar, everything will be understood, everything is explained. Azoy as is following up Derech Memela, the Shilas, and also that automatically these questions are resolved. Basically, the Rebbe's question is, it seems like in our Rashi, that writing Shabbos first is the reason why Higdim, that's why we know that that's stronger than the Mechas HaMishkan. But but from the other places, it seems like that it's the extra pasuk, even though it's the extra pasuk that tells us, because if the order would be what tells us, why doesn't the pasuk in Kisisa and in the pasuk in Kedoshim tell us first Shabbos? So we know that Shabbos is important, more important, just like it tells us in the Parshas Vayakhal over here. So that means that we need a special limud, as the Rebbe brings down, either because it says Ach es Shabbos, the word Ach, mute, or because it says Ani Hashem Elekechem, that we're all chayv in the honor of Hashem, but on its own it's not a proof. So why does Rashi say here that the hiktim lahem, that it comes first, the Shabbos, and that means that it's more important? But the Rebbe explains very simply. The Rebbe says we're not talking about over here about the Torah writing something first, meaning that it's more important. No, that's not, like we said from later on, the evidence. What the question is here is, why did Moshe Rabbeinu tell them that first? And he changed from the order before. Let's look inside. The Bir in dem yeshlem b'pashtus. The explanation we can say simply. Mit der Werte higdim lahem as horas Shabbos chulu loimer sheinadeches Shabbos. When Rashi says that he proceeded to tell them about the Azhara Shabbos, to teach us that the Mishkan would not override Shabbos. Is Rashi nicht äußern zu sagen, Rashi is not out to tell us here, as von dem was the Torah is the Magdim Azhara Shabbos. That's from the fact that the Torah proceeds to write first the warning of Shabbos. Far dem Tzivu Melechas HaMishkan, before the Torah writes about the command of the Mishkan, learned men of the din. So from this we learn the halacha as Melechas HaMishkan is Nidoiche Shabbos, that it does not override the Shabbos. That this would be the source for the din. We wouldn't need a source for the din when we just learned in the Parshas Kisisa the source for the din. Why would the Torah have to write this a second time, the Rebbe argues? Warum der din atzma ist schon angesagt geworden früher. The din itself has already been instructed in the Parsha of Kisisa. In Parshas Sisa, wo steht, Betzivu Hashem el Moshe. Over there it says, when Hashem commands Moshe, it says, Aches Shabsoi Tishmoiru v'goymer, that you should keep my Shabbos, and Rashi is dort mefarish kinal si beis, as Rashi explains there with the si beis, L'mayit Shabbos Melechas HaMishkan. So we know that we are excluding Aches Shabsoi Tishmoiru, that we cannot do the Melechas HaMishkan on Shabbos. Unsis Muva Me'elov. And then it's self-understood as when Torah der Zel der noch be Parsha Seinu. That when the Torah tells later on the Parsha be Moshe übergegeben in, that Moshe has transmitted, given over to the Jews, the Tzivuim of Shabbos Melechas HaMishkan, the commands for Shabbos and for the Mishkan. It does given genoi kamer leil be Parshas Tisa. It was exactly as said before in Parshas Tisa, gesagt Eden, that he said to the Eden, as Melechas HaMishkan is Nidoicha Shabbos. The Eibishter told him over there that it's not Nidoicha Shabbos, so Moshe Rabbeinu must have told the Eden that Shabsoise Tishmeiru is Lema'id Shabbos Melechas HaMishkan. So when Hashem is saying to him, don't do the Melechas HaMishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu told it to the Yid. So what is Rashi telling us over here? He's not telling us the halacha that it's not overriding Shabbos. That we know. Nor the diugdo is the emphasis, the specific language here is higdim lohem as hora Shabbos chulu. He introduced to them. We're not discussing here that the Torah writes it first because this is a Shabbos command. We're talking about why the Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to the Yidden, it comes first. By Rashi is schwer, Rashi is difficult, Rashi is coming to answer, Vibal, as in Divra HaKodesh Baruch Hu Moshe is gesagt geworden. Since when Hashem spoke to Moshe, it was said, Der Tzivu Melechas HaMishkan, Koidem Lazor Shabbos, the instruction for doing the Mishkan comes before Azor Shabbos. That's the way it was told to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu change? By Übergeben die Zivuyim zu Eden, when he gave over the commands to the Eden, why did he first say to them Azor Shabbos? We're not talking about why does the Torah write it first. We're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah records as it took place by Moshe that Moshe said it first. Why would he say it first? If they went with Rashi, to tell them that it doesn't override Shabbos. We bowed as Moshe to gedarft übergeben. Since Moshe had to give them over as Melechas HaMishkan is in Deicha Shabbos. And to tell them, they used to told him, he had to tell them that it's not Deicha Shabbos. As he was instructed in the portion of Sisa. Magdim given as Horas Shabbos. That's why he introduced first to tell them about Shabbos. Which means not that this is the source for the halacha that you don't do melacha on Shabbos for the Mishkan. That we know. But here he's trying to give them an extra, since he has to tell them that you can't do malacha on Shabbos the Mishkan. He tells it to them by also first writing. He was magdim to them, to the people, to tell them so that they don't do the malacha Shabbos the Mishkan. This haste, which really means in addition to that Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden explicitly, told them outright, as Melechas HaMishkan is Nidoiches Shabbos, that the work of the Mishkan does not override Shabbos. Is Behoi Sofelose, in addition to that, Idei zu verstarken by Yidden am Chomer von Azhoras Shabbos, in order to strengthen by Yidden the strength of the warning of Shabbos. He also introduced them, telling them the command of Shabbos before Melechas HaMishkan. That was the way of Moshe Rabbeinu encouraging them. By telling them, so now that we're saying that this is not learned from because the Torah put it first, this is only explaining why Moshe Rabbeinu changed it. So based on this, automatically it falls away the Shakla Vitari and Abba Pirush Rashi, the question and debate in Rashi's commentary. Der Pirush mit Pirush Rashi in Parsha Tisu Bar Kedoshim. How does this Rashi fit with Rashi in the Parsha Tisu Parsha Kedoshim? It's not even a question because by us it's not the pasuk, it's not determined. While in unser Sedre Rashi bechlal nit wegen dem limud. In our parsha, we're not talking at all about where do we know it from Vanant, about how we learn out Memveis as Melechas HaMishkan and Edichas Shabbos. Melechas HaMishkan is not override Shabbos. That's not the debate. Yesh leim as noch enami. As for Gedima ve'icher bekosuv, you say Gedima can man nit uplernen al derech hapshat. We cannot learn according to the Pshat as their Mugdam is Machriun is Deichet Mocher, that the first one overrides the Mocher. We can't talk that not know that. But Rashi wants to know why Moshe Rabbeinu told it to them first. And that says because he wants to give them extra warning, as the Rebbe will explain. But the Psukim in Kisis over there, we know it because there's an extra limit for that, as the Rebbe will explain. So now, Nois Dalet, the Rebbe will explain why Taka did Moshe Rabbeinu need to take this extra precaution and tell them about the Shabbos first, what was going on. And the Rebbe will also bring in that there's actually two commands over here in these psukim, one to Moshe and then another one for the Yidden. Why is there two? And the Rebbe will explain these are for two different perspectives, one for the Yidden and one for Moshe, as the Rebbe will continue. Dalet, there's bleibt aber nicht moving. It still not remains not understood. About as by Onzogen die Tzivuim zu Moshe, since when these commands were told Moshe, or der Eberster nicht magdim given as Horas Shabbos Mishkan, he did not say first the Shabbos warning before telling them about the Mishkan. About his dot the Reif der Miut ach as Shabbos Tishmeiru, and there is the special exclusions. So the Eberster doesn't have to warn them about Shabbos before what the Eibster says to Moshe, he doesn't have to tell him because he tells him beferish that they shouldn't do Melacha Mishkan on Shabbos. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu or was it Moshe Rabbeinu gedarf zugeben? So why did Moshe have to add Atois had Goshe, an additional emphasis durch Magdim Zayin as Horas Shabbos by introducing the warning for Shabbos? And first, like, under Mishane sein. So he changed them Seder HaTzivuyim, the order of the command, wie sie seinen gesagt geworden, der HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as they were been said by Hashem. So why is that? Over there was a Meferish Apostle, tell them that Shabbos is not overridden by the Mishkan, Achas HaPshoisai. So he said first the Mishkan, and then he said Shabbos. How come he says Shabbos over here to emphasize stronger? But das Verstehen behagt im Abir in Pirish Rashi im Postkanal beParshas Tisa, explaining the Rashi on the previous posting in the portion Tisa. It says Va'ato daber al bnei Yisrael leimer achas shabsoyset tishmeru. So this is what the Eibishter is saying to Moshe, that you speak to the bnei Yisrael shabsoyset tishmeru. So Rashi stellt sich im ersten Dibur HaMaschil, die Werte, Va'ato daber al bnei Yisrael. You shall speak to the bnei Yisrael. Und es mefarish, he explains Va'ato, and you, Va'ato daber al bnei Yisrael. Av al pi shivkadeticha litzavoisum amalechas hamishkan. Even though I've instructed you to command them that they should do the Mishkan. Al yekal benecha. So this is something which is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Don't be it light in your eyes, litchis Shabbos b'bnei Isa melacha, to override the Shabbos for that melacha. So this is the Eibishter talking to Moshe and saying, Va'ato daber el bnei Yisrael. Why va'ato? Va'ato daber, because don't make it light in your eyes. And then, following that, Bait is Rashi Mefarish. Ach, as Shabsoyse Tishmeiru, you should keep, however, you must keep the Shabbos, Afal Pi Shatiyu Redufim, Uzrizim Bizrizus HaMalacha, even though you're going to be running and quickly to in the haste of the work, in other words, the alacrity, the accomplishing it. Shabbos al titchem beponel, but can't override the Shabbos because of it. Kolachin chulu. So if you compare the Rashi, you see one is talking to Moshe, one is talking to Bnei Yisrael. From Pashtus, Loshen Rashi is Muchach. From the simple language Rashi, it's evident that those are zwei besondere Azoris. That these are two separate warnings, as Melechas and Mishkan is only Dechazai Shabbos, that the work of the Mishkan should not override Shabbos. Eine von übrigem Wort Va'ato, one from there said Va'ato, you, und the zweite von Miyut Ach. Why do we need two psukim? Isn't it moving Aleph in Farshim fragen? First of all, the Farshim asks Tarti Lomali, why do we need two psukim? Beis, we learned an often word Va'ato Dabar Bnei Yisrael. It says, you speak as al yekel beinechel litchis Shabbos b'Bnei Yisrael Malacha, that it shouldn't be light in your eyes to override the Shabbat for the Malacha. Why? How does Va'ata say, and you? But how do we see that al yekel beinecha litchis Shabbos to override the Shabbat? So why do we need two psukim? One for Moshe, one for the, and then over here, how do we see it from Va'ata? Ich darf mir verstehen, also to understand the arichus loshon for Rashi. Rashi's length in the zwei Perushim, in these two interpretation. When the Shinuyim zwischen sie and the difference between them. Aleph, the diuk haloshen afal pishiv kadeticha. The specific language, what does Rashi mean? Is although I've commanded you, l'tzabeisam amlechas hamishkan. Since I have instructed you to tell them that Mishkan ki'ilu, it almost sounds as if them is given aminu miyucha, that there was like a special appointment. Go tell them about the Mishkan. Ganz teure mitzvahs ist übergegeben geworden zu ihnen durch Moshe Rabbeinu. The entire teure mitzvahs have been transmitted to the Yidden through Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is that as afopishiv kadeticha, as if this is something special? And Beis, he says, al yekel be'einechol litcheskulu, that you should not be light in your eyes. Und Rashi sagt nicht, bekitzer al titche, should not override Yetzbe, but Loshan Rashi atzmai, take if noch dem in the zweiten Dibas. Rashi says in the second one that it says Aches, so he said that it's not Teicher. What if Yekel Beinacham? Gimel, in the zweiten Dibur bringt Rashi Anayim in. In the second one, he brings in something new. Afal Pisha to you, Redufim Uzrisim is Rizam even though you're going to be chased and you're going to be a haste in the haste of the work. How does Rashi know this? Why is this only in the second? All these changes. So the Rebbe is going to explain now how all these languages that Rashi uses over here, and Al Yekel Beinecho, and a new topic of Redufim, how this is connected to a special situation as Moshe Rabbeinu has to give it over to the Yid versus how it's given over to Moshe. Yeshloimar, hey, Abir and them. The chilik zwischen the Tzei Pirush Rashi is the difference between these two. Rashi's commentary is the mentioned Dibur wo Rashi stellt sich auf die Wörter va'ato daber Bnei Yisrael. On the first Rashi, in which Rashi places himself, and you speak Bnei Yisrael, retzich klapi Moshe atzme. This talks about towards Moshe himself. Rashi's madgish b'lashoinei, as Rashi emphasized Lashon, afal pishiv kadeticha letzavoisum chulu, even though I've commanded you to do, al yekel beinechachu. He's talking something to Moshe Rabbeinu. In your eyes should not be light. Masha'enkin, the zweiten dibur aches absoiset tishmeidu. But when we talk about in the second Rashi, in which it says tishmeiru, talking about Odin, tishmeiru. So over there, that Rashi b'shayches to Bnei Yisrael. Over there, Rashi talks about as it pertains to the Bnei Yisrael. Afal pishet tiyu losharam. Although redufim, Und das Guf is der Tam, was seine Neute bei der Lemudim, that's stuck at the reason, because we're talking about Moshe, and we're talking about the Yidden, and that's really two commands. Es ist nicht Däume, wie man bewohnt Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not the same, it's not similar, the way we caution Moshe Rabbeinu, as Shabbos wird nicht nitche mitlemech, sa Mishkan. That Shabbos is not overridden because of the work in the Mishkan. Und wie das wird bewohnt, benegea Yidden, and how we caution this as it relates to the Yidden. Wie Rashi is as madgish durch Shinui HaLeshonis in the Tzvei Diburim, as Rashi emphasizes this by the change of language in these two Rashis. That's Borin, Rebbe explains. Der Tzivui of Meleches HaMishkan is gekommen, like Pirush Rashi. The command to do the work for the Mishkan came, as Rashi's opinion, Noch der Slichai from Cheta Egel, after God has forgiven them for the sin of the Egel. While the Mishkan is Virashi is Mefarish, because the Mishkan, as Rashi explained, is Eidos li Yisrael Shebita Lahem HaKadosh Baruch Al Maisa Egel. That's a testimony for the Yidden that Hashem has foregone for them for the sin or the act of the Egel. Shari Yishu Shechinasi B'nei, because he rests the Shechina. That means that's a testimony that Hashem has forgone because he did rest the Shechina in them. Das sagt Rashi in dem zweiten Dibur. Af al pishati yuredufim uzrizim bizrizus hamelochem. So although you'll be sort of pushed, hasty, zrizim, want to do it quick. Shabbos al titchem bonel. Should not push with the Shabbos. The chash was from the bavonim by Bnei Yisrael is. What is the worry that we want to worry by the Yidden is not that they will assume that they might accept as the work of the Mishkan vekt iber on his doiche Shabbos that overrides and it pushes away Shabbos. But in bepashtus, for example, Eden vel medas atzmon nit paskinen. Eden will not rule on their own as Melechus HaMishkan is doiche Shabbos. You don't have to worry about that they're going to come up to tell them. Of course, they're going to ask Moshe how to conduct himself on Shabbos. Nor, what is the worry? This and the Kazdashros Ashkine Mishkan is the Bavais of Kaporos Chet Egel, since they know that the resting of the Shechin and the Mishkan is evidence for the atonement for the sin of the Egel. Well, they zain, then they're going to be. They need to be. Redufim. They need to be running after. They're being chased for that. To hurry with very great alacrity to conclude the work of the Mishkan, in order for the atonement to come the earliest possible. And the riber is olum, and therefore it might happen. It's possible as these askus for redifa, that when you are occupied in a way that you're rushing on zrizes and haste, so goyim zayin, it might cause mezon nichsel werden zu tun im Melechus HaMishkan b'Shabbos, that you might stumble and you're going to do the Melechus HaMishkan on Shabbos. That's why Yidden are cautioned. Even though you're going to be chased and haste, Shabbos cannot be pushed away because of you quickly trying to build the Mishkan. This is only as it affects the Yidden. To begin with, Moshe Rabbeinu had no connection to the sin of the Egel. And even after the sin of the Egel, the Yidden were sort of excommunication to the Rav. Hashem sort of excommunicated them. Is Olisha Moshe given an Oyel Moyed, but still Moshe Rabbeinu's tent remained a tent of meeting, Mokum Shechina, a place of the Shechina. Is move on. So then it's understood as Klape Moshe Atzmei, that for Moshe itself, He's not given Shaykh der Chash mitzad the Redufim was Rizim Chulu, that the Redufim was Rizim, that he should worry about him, that he's going to want to do it also on Shabbos, that he might stumble because he wasn't chased, because he didn't need that atonement. He was always with the Shekhinah. Ubefrat, as Rashi is Mefarish, especially Rashi says, he Bechlal didn't do any work in the Mishkan. So we didn't have a worry that he should, because of the haste, he's going to violate the Shabbos. So the Gereta Mo Baruch has spoken at length. Adosis Kavonas Rashi from Posik. This is Rashi's intent on the verse buying Tzivu Melechas HaMishkan in unser Sedra. The command, the Eibishter says the Mishkan our Sedra. Vayomer Moshe Goymer Zeh Hadovar Shetziv Hashem Leimer. Hashem said to say, Rashi says, Li Leimer Lachem, because it didn't apply to him. Zeh Hadovar Shetziv Hashem Li Leimer Lachem, Rashi explains. What does that mean? As that Tzivu from Moshe Zeh Hadovar, that this command, this is the matter, is given Bloizev Leimer Lachem, just to tell you. So he was on Eden. Aber Moshe Alein, is of them not given mitzvah. He himself was not commanded. But he had a place of divine even without the Mishkan, so he did not have to build the Mishkan because he had a Mishkan Israel made. So he didn't have to warn him he's going to run to make it. That was Dachman Babam and Moshe. What do you have to say, Moshe? Even though I've appointed you to command the Mamlechas HaMishkan, Al Yekel Be'einecha, don't be light in your eyes, Litches Es HaShabbos B'nei Melacha, to override, to push away the Shabbos for the Melacha. That's something that we have to caution, and that's his Kiddel Kamon that we will be explained. So the Rebbe explains that the two instructions about keeping Shabbos, there's one for the Yidden, which needed atonement, and they might stumble to do it quickly. Tell them, no, you can't override the Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu has a separate. He didn't have the worry. First of all, he didn't part of the sin, and he had a Mishkan. He wasn't, Oyel Moed was the Mishkan. The Eibishter was not anywhere, but in that, by Moshe Rabbeinu, by the Oyel Moed, he did have, his tent was the Mokim Shechina. And therefore, by him, though, there's another aspect, as the Rebbe explains in Orizvov. Rashi brings a rope, say Parshas Tisa. Rashi brings down in the other Parshas the Seder Mishnah, the order of the study. The Moshe Gilan Torah mit Yidden, how Moshe studied Torah with Yidden. Nichnas Aaron, Shona le Moshe Pirkei. Aaron entered, so Moshe taught him his chapter. Nichnas Subonov, then his sons of Aaron entered, Shona lahem, he repeated again, Moshe to the sons of Aaron. Nichnasus Kenim, then the elders entered, Shona lahem, then Moshe Rabbeinu taught them. Nichnasu kol ha'am, then all the people entered, Shona lahem, he taught all the people. Nimtzon. V'yad kol ha'am echad, the entire people heard it once. We had Askenim Beis, they had it twice. We had the neighbor Aaron Shloisha, they heard it 3 times. We had Aaron Abba had it 4 times. So first, the Rebbe says like this: the Tamfa was Rashi is Moisei V'Chulu Kedisa Be'eruvin. As the Gemara, what does Rashi want with that? Because it seems a little surprising that the one who seemingly needed the most review would be the Am. They got the less review. And the more important, Aaron gets 4 reviews. Why would Aaron need 4 reviews and other people just have 1 review? So Rashi is trying to answer the Eshloimab, as it is the mid-merames of the Memshech HaGemara, that he hints for the continuation of the Gemara. As noch the Moshe Ferendig seine Firma lernen, that after Moshe Rabbeinu did the 4 times, it's Shon Aaron Pirkei. Then Aaron taught them what he learned, and then Shon Lahem Bono Pirkom to the Yidden, and Shon Lahem Zkenim Pirkom, the Zkenim also taught them the Pirkom. So, which means that the Yidden got the, not only from Moshe, but they got it, one from Aaron and one from the Zkenim, and one from Bnei Aaron and one from the Zkenim. Und der Mitbah von Rashi, Ashayle Gedoyle Bipshute Mikra. And Rashi is trying to tell us, answer by quoting in the Gemara at the end of Eruvin. Rashi is answering it. A big question in simple meaning. Wie kommt es, als Aaron soll davon hören viermal? How is it that Aaron should have to listen 4 times? Und für Arbonov is genug dreimal. For son is enough 3. For the Skenim 2. For the Skenim is enough twice. And for Kolam Blazer, einmal only once. Makes it's the opposite. It's it makes sense. Logically, it's different. But according to the answer, it's answered by the Gemara Firtortois. So it turns out that everybody heard it 4 times. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron heard it 4 times from Moshe Rabbeinu, and then the other people heard it 4 times from Aaron, etc. Second two is as andere Zivuya Teure haben nicht gehört, nicht nur von Moshe. Turns out that the other commands of the Torah, the Yidden heard them not just from Moshe, they heard from Aaron and Bonavas Kenim. They all heard it from Aaron, his sons, and the elders. But the command of Melechas HaMishkan was in a way the Eibishter appointed him to tell them the Melechas HaMishkan. As das übergeben to Eden dem Zivui Melechas HaMishkan, that the transmitting to the Yidden, the command for the Mishkan, is not given late in Seder Mishnah. That wasn't according to the order of learning. Nor v'dertzel b'reish Parsha Seinu, but as related the beginning of a Parsha, Vayakhal Moshe as kol adas b'nei Yisrael vayemer aleim. Moshe gathered the entire Jewish community and he spoke to them. Moshe had geretz ali in b'shova. He spoke to everybody equally. Without distinction between Aaron and his son, the elders, and the whole and the people. Vayakhal Moshe kol adas, everybody together. This is what Rashi says. Even though I appointed you to command the Melechas HaMishkan, al yekel beinecha, so should not be light. Shabbos should not be light. Zendik as their tzivui of Melechas HaMishkan is in an eifim miyuchat. Seeing that the command for Melechas HaMishkan is in a special way. I have appointed you to tell them about Melechas HaMishkan. This is unique for Melechas HaMishkan. Anders von anderen Tzivuya Torah different. The other commands can therefore by Moshe werden masvore. So Moshe might think as the Gabi Melechas HaMishkan that when it comes to the work of the Mishkan, is a svara, is a kula in Shabbos, be lean in Shabbos. Ubemele yekal beinecho litches es ha-Shabbos m'bnei Yisrael melocha. It'll be light in your eyes to override the Shabbos for that work. Es wird ihm sein gering zu deuche sein Shabbos zu lieb Melechas HaMishkan. It'll be easy to work because this is a special mitzvah. Vavornt ben im al yekal beinecho. That's why we caution it should not be light. As only werden akul in Shabbos, it should not bring a light in Shabbos. So the Rebbe explains that this was specially told. The mitzvah of Mishkan was unique, and that was said only by Moshe to Klal Yisrael, different than all everything else. So because of the importance, Moshe might take this importance, so it's going to be light for him the Shabbos, because maybe you should override. Look how important this is. The pasuk says, "Al yekal beinecha va'ata tetzaveh," as only dver nakula in Shabbos. Apizeis farentu the parsha the shaila now. Now we can answer simply the question: Wie kemen from va'ata daber of Bnei Yisrael upland in the minyan from al yekal beinecha? How do we see va'ata daber Bnei Yisrael? How could we learn the idea not to be light in your eyes? Durch onzogun Moshe. By telling Moshe, as euch der Tzivui from Shabbos daber sein, that we tell Moshe that the Tzivui of Shabbos, the Ato daber al Bnei Yisrael, Here we're also telling about Shabbos, not only Mechsa Mishkan, but also Shabbos. Moshe Lein Zol Dos Zogim. That also the Mlechas Shabbos that did not work in Shabbos is Va'ata David of Neisla. Moshe Lein Zol Dos Zogim. Ali Yidin Bakoli is saying by himself, everybody gathered together. Punkt viv kadetichel etzaves Mlechas Mishkan. Just as I've instructed you to tell Mlechas Mishkan. He actually did so, as in our parsha. Vayakhal Moshe goymer vayemer aleim goymer sheishis yomim. He's telling them all by himself. And that is mudgish geworden to Moshe. That emphasized to Moshe as Shabbos is nit kal be'eze oifen shulu v'amlechas hamishkan. That Shabbos is not light in any way any shape relative to mlechas hamishkan, because also Shabbos was said to him in such a way. Zion. So now we also understand that because anal is a move on based on the above. We also understand that Tam Hashinui is Seder Hatzivui in Zwischen Parshas Tisa and Parshas Seinu, the order of the command of Parshas Tisa, in which first it talks about the Mishkan and then Shabbos, and our Parsha, which we talk first about Shabbos and then about Mishkan. In Parshas Tisa, was letzter wegen dem Tzivu Havayel Moshe, when Hashem's command Moshe kommt früher der Tzivu of Melechas HaMishkan, und dann noch Azoras Shabbos, and then Azoras Shabbos. Why? Weil der Iker is da, der Tzivu Melechas HaMishkan. Mainly we're talking about Melechas HaMishkan. Und Azoras Shabbos kommt the Blois al Tofel. Warning Shabbos is only a secondary, shouldn't override the Shabbos. As Melechas HaMishkan is the Nedech Shabbos, Melechas HaMishkan doesn't override Shabbos. The first state Melechas HaMishkan freer. That's why Melechas HaMishkan says first. Ashenkin in unser Sedre, as opposed to in our Sedre, was letzter wegen dem Tzivu Moshe zu Bnei Yisrael, in which we discuss, and Moshe is telling it to Bnei Yisrael, but in the Eibishter schon angesagt with Parshas Tisa. The Eibishter told him, as sie darf man bewornen, that jeden darf man kosten them nicht nur dem Din, as Melechas HaMishkan is the Deiche Shabbos, not only the Halacha, nor as Afal Pi Shetiyu, you darf sein, the Duf regime that you're going to be, and you need to going to be chased. So they say, Shabbos, that to be careful not to stumble against the keeping of the Shabbos, the warning of keeping Shabbos. In order to caution, they will need to precede the Ashora from Shabbos. First, the warning about Shabbos was the Hagdome to Toif. This introduction accomplishes the Isur from Shabbos far Melechas HaMishkan. That by them the Isur Shabbos is from Melechas HaMishkan. B'meila, wenn sie ständig gedenken und sein sollen, they'll always be remembering and be careful. Also when they're chasing and they're hasty in the Melechas HaMishkan, Ados turn it on in them Shabbos Shabbosim Hashem. That is not to touch the Shabbos Shabbosim Hashem. So basically, the Tzivui in Parshas Tisa, it's mainly coming to tell about the Mishkan. So we have to tell you also about the Shabbos. That's why first comes the Mishkan. But to Moshe was already told before that Yidden might violate it, or they might be because of redifus. They're going to chase after the mitzvah. They should not stumble. So Moshe Rabbeinu says that first because he wants to make sure that they're not going to stumble over the mitzvah of Shabbos. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayakhal Pekudei Shabbos Parshas Vayikra Tov Shin Chof Ches.